In the year of our Lord 2024, Donald Trump has won the presidency once again. What do you think happened?
So if I yelled and screamed on the show, I took my clothes off, it would get a lot of publicity, right? But if you give a thoughtful answer to a complicated question, it's not so sexy for the media.
I remember back in 2016, all the polls were saying that Hillary was going to win, but then when she ended up losing, of course, I wasn't happy about that, but I thought that makes sense.
It's easy to say, well, you know, she wasn't a good candidate. Then why did I lead all the way to the end? Why did I get nominated overwhelmingly?
From former Democratic National Committee Chairwoman Donna Brazile, that the Clinton campaign, in her view, did rig the presidential nominating process by entering into an agreement to control day-to-day operations at the DNC. The Clinton campaign controlling the party's staffing, strategy, finances, communications, and that agreement was entered into in August 2015, a year before she defeated Senator Bernie Sanders. This must shock you.
Look, this is a real problem. But what we've got to do as Democrats now is we've got to hold this party accountable.
People wanted change. There was a candidate on the Democratic side who offered change, and then there was the whole thing about the Democrats rigging the election against Bernie Sanders.
Very quickly, Senator, do you agree with the notion that it was rigged?
Yes.
So to me, in 2016, it made sense that people voted for Donald Trump. Then in 2020, again, same thing. Bernie Sanders runs again.
We got to stop building and replacing pipelines. You got to go vote for somebody else.
All right, thanks so much, sir. We're going to have you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I'm going to vote you in the general if you treat me right.
Yeah, I know. Well, I'm not.
We have Joe Biden. And I thought, oh my God, Democratic Party is toast.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Joe Biden obviously has dementia. You could see videos where people ask him questions and he gets really angry with them and tells them to vote for somebody else, even like grabs their shirt and shit. And I thought, how the hell do people believe that he is the more electable candidate?
Remember what happened in 2020. Okay, the president did not run a great primary campaign. He lost badly in Iowa, New Hampshire, and Nevada. He came out of Nevada, and Bernie Sanders looked like the presumptive nominee. And this exact same group of people, the elites, that the president is now deriding as elites, and by the way, they're not. They're Democrats, okay? They're party operatives, they're donors, they're volunteers, decided, and to all the Bernie supporters out there, I'm not judging this positively or negatively, they decided they didn't want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee. They decided that Joe Biden would be the better nominee.
3 million people that were deported and separated from their families.
Yeah. Well, you should vote for Trump. You should vote for Trump.
He is going to lose, especially he didn't seem to have any qualities that would excite people other than I'm not Trump. And you could have run anybody else and said, hey, vote for me, I'm not Trump. Whereas there's definitely a section of the population who are very excited for Trump. But much to my surprise, Joe Biden actually won that election. So what was I expecting this time around? For the most part, I was expecting Kamala Harris to win, but the first time I was like, the first time after like the assassination attempt and after Joe Biden stepped down, where I thought, okay, maybe Kamala Harris doesn't have this quite in the bag. I never thought that she had it in the bag. I thought that she would have to fight for it, but I thought that she was putting up a much better fight than certainly her Democratic predecessors, certainly better than Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, and much better than Donald Trump, who just, I don't know what the fuck he was doing here. Anyway, first time I was like, oh my God, Liz Cheney and Dick Cheney.
No regrets about Iraq. I think we made exactly the right decisions.
A lot of people like Donald Trump because they see him as an anti-war candidate. Now, you could bring up several points of, oh, well, he said this.
We've been threatened very directly by Iran. And I think you have to let them know, because the best way to do it is through the office of the president, that you do any attacks on former presidents or candidates for president, your country gets blown to smithereens, as we say.
He said this.
I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. It's true.
He did this while he was in office. And those are all valid points, but I do think that aligning yourself with people who, when you hear the name Cheney, most people think, oh, that's the guy who led us into war. So all of this, I think, didn't help her at all. The other thing, it is important to point out that Trump isn't anti-war, but I don't think that that point is made often on the mainstream news or in the debates. And I feel like the best way to make an argument saying that Trump is not the anti-war guy is to be yourself anti-war and to not be hawkish and not to praise people who are hawkish while ignoring what they've done. Speaking of that, it really bothered me. Back in 2020, people were hating on Bernie Sanders and also on Andrew Yang for deciding to go on Joe Rogan's podcast.
You give a thoughtful answer to a complicated question, it's not so sexy for the media.
Well, you don't even have a chance to give a thoughtful answer. Like Tulsi Gabbard went after Kamala Harris, and then Kamala Harris had about 12 seconds to reply to it. It was so ridiculous.
And they were pointing out everything problematic that Joe Rogan has ever said. My opinion on that is he has a fucking audience. I was so upset when I found out that Joe Rogan would be interviewing Donald Trump. That interview had about as many views as the debate. So if 1% of the people who watched that podcast interview decided, hey, I'm gonna vote for Trump, I wasn't gonna vote at all, but what the hell ever, I might as well just go and vote for Trump. You can win the election that way. Meanwhile, we get rally after rally. I'm hearing good news that Kamala Harris had this rally that drew 75,000 people. I'm like, what the hell is 75,000 people compared to tens of millions of people who watched that Joe Rogan interview? And not just Joe Rogan. I know that Donald Trump went on other podcasts, Andrew Schultz, Theo Vaughn, etc. And I know that Kamala Harris went on Call Her Daddy, but I was really upset that she didn't prioritize Joe Rogan interview. He was willing to meet with Kamala Harris. Instead, we get rallies, and I don't know. I don't really see the value of rallies because, in my opinion, people who show up are already going to vote for you anyway. So I don't know how important that is in swinging undecided voters or people who don't usually vote. Those are my things. In terms of like policy or anything, yeah, I can talk about things that I disagree with Kamala Harris, but I do think that compared to Donald Trump, and again, compared to Hillary Clinton and compared to Joe Biden, I think that she ran a significantly better campaign when it comes to substance. And I was very glad that she picked Tim Walz, but I'm sure a lot of people are going to say, if only she had picked Josh Shapiro, then the Democrats could have gotten Pennsylvania. And maybe that's true. I don't know. Wonder if Josh Shapiro will run for president next time. But my God, I really hope that the next people who do run decide to go on the podcast, because I even saw this comment on Andrew Schultz of, it's so sad that we trust comedians over the news networks, which there's a whole other discussion on whether or not new media is more trustworthy than legacy media. I mean, Tim Pool and co. were bought off by Russia. And on the topic of the Joe Rogan interview, I really liked seeing how Kyle Kulinski, who was friends, I don't know if they're still friends, he was really pissed off about that interview.
Let me tell you what wasn't asked about. So what wasn't asked about is Israel in the midst of Israel committing a genocide and the U.S. arming and funding Israel to commit that genocide, and Donald Trump saying, the problem with that policy is we're not arming and funding them enough, and we're not supporting them enough. He wants to put the genocide into hyperdrive. That was not asked about. Roe versus Wade was not asked about. The fake elector slates was not asked about. His war crimes were not asked about. His corruption was not asked about. His 91 criminal charges was not asked about.
At the end, he said that he didn't know if it would change anything because that's what Bernie did. Bernie tried to go for the people who do not usually vote, and he was not successful at the end. But I want to point out that Bernie was relatively successful given how he was blacked out by legacy media. I remember how MSNBC, CNN, all of those liberal news networks were coming after Bernie, and there were times where even Fox News was like, hey.
So this called their friends over on CNN, the digital bodyguard of the ruling class, and they begged for help. And CNN delivered, as it always does. Just days before the last debate, CNN ran an utterly unproven hit piece on Sanders, calling him a sexist. And then they went further.
Senator Sanders, I do want to be clear here. You're saying that you never told Senator Warren that a woman could not win the election.
That is correct.
Senator Warren, what did you think when Senator Sanders told you a woman could not win the election?
I disagreed.
See, he's a sexist, just like Donald Trump. And that was the signal to all the other establishment toadies to pile on, which they obediently did. Paul Krugman waddled out from his cubicle at the New York Times to call Bernie Sanders a liar. Craven hack John Chait of New York Magazine did what he was told, as he always does, and he called Sanders' surge an act of insanity. David Frum at The Atlantic reassured his panicked readers that Bernie can't win. But of course, none of them really believe that, or they wouldn't be writing these pieces in the first place. They know Sanders could win, and they're worried about it.
After the senator's big win in Nevada, likening it to a Nazi invasion during World War II. Watch.
I'm reading last night about the fall of France in the summer of 1940, and the general, Renault, calls up Churchill and says, "It's over." And Churchill said, "How can it be? You got the greatest army in Europe. How can it be over?" He said, "It's over." So I had that suppressed feeling. I can't be as wild as Carville, but he is damn smart, and I think he's damn right on this one.
Here's the spokesperson for Bernie Sanders reacting to that. He said, "Never thought part of my job would be pleading with the national news network to stop likening the campaign of a Jewish presidential candidate whose family was wiped out by the Nazis to the Third Reich. But here we are."
They were being more fair towards Bernie at times. So with Donald Trump getting all this cheerleading from Fox News, which is the most popular news network, in addition to going on those podcasts, I do think that that helped push him over the edge. In 2027, when primary season will start, first of all, we need to get it out of our heads that, oh, hey, if you see a candidate that you like their policies, you like their record, a lot of what they've said and done matches up with your values. Oh, but you have to settle for this awful, cheap knockoff version instead because they're more electable. Please just do not listen to the mainstream media when they tell you to neglect your values and go after somebody that you do not like because they are more electable. That is the first thing.
You know, your candidate might be better on, I don't know, healthcare than Joe is. But you've got to look at who's going to win this election. And maybe you have to swallow a little bit and say, okay, I sort of personally like so-and-so better. But your bottom line has to be that we have to beat Trump.
If these people lied to you about Hillary Clinton's electability when she ended up losing to Trump, if they covered up Biden's cognitive health until that debate happened and it was very clear to everyone that Joe Biden was in cognitive decline, maybe you shouldn't trust them. Don't let them manipulate who you're going to vote for. That's the first thing.
This is a test for Tom Perez. And either he's going to succeed by bringing Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders representatives into this process, and they're going to say it's fair, it works, we all believe it, or he's going to fail. And I very much hope he succeeds.
She does have a point. We should have a fair primary, and all these years later, we have yet to have a really good fair primary. So I'm not counting on it happening next time around. Therefore, if we do get somebody who has a great record, who has great policies, great ideas, then we cannot rely on mainstream media to get their message out there. With Kamala Harris, she was more of an establishment Democrat, so a lot of cheerleading from the liberal media of MSNBC, CNN, etc. But that couldn't get her over the finish line, especially when she only had 3 months to get her message out. That's why I think that she should have gone on Joe Rogan, and definitely I think that Tim Walz should have gone. If Bernie Sanders was able to win over a lot of Joe Rogan's audience, I think that Tim Walz can.
Do you get frustrated by the time constraints of the debates?
Absolutely. You shouldn't even call them a debate. What they are is a reality TV show in which you have to come up with a soundbite and all that stuff. It is the meaning. It's the meaning to the candidates, and it's the meaning to the American people. You can't explain the complexity of healthcare in America in 45 seconds. Nobody can.
Well, I do not agree that a cage fighter is necessarily more qualified than an actual journalist who studies these issues and who asks tough questions. I do understand the argument against the debate forums, that they only allow you to provide sound bites, and so people who can come up with the best prepared sound bites will win the debate, and it's not necessarily based on substance.
The internet has revolutionized politics. And in many ways, good ways. We use our social media, our email list, which is very large. Every day we're sending out stuff, and other candidates are doing it the same way. But television still has a very important role to be playing.
I'm sure it does, but I mean, the ability to discuss things in long form, like you can do online, like you can do right here, right now.
Right.
You can't get that on television.
These complaints were made 5 years ago. So I really do wish that the Democratic Party had paid more attention to this, paid more attention to the fact that there is an audience out there. They do not care about the debates. They do not care about who has the best soundbite. They care about who can perform the best long-form discussion. So that's why I think it was a big mistake for Kamala Harris not to go on. That's just my opinion. What's your opinion of what happened, and where do we go from here, and what can the Democrats learn?